Evening. I don't have anything to bring to your attention by way of follow-up from last time.
Anybody else? All right. We will move on to Advanced Casper.
Thank you, sir.
I'm sorry, sir. I do have one follow-up. I checked with the chief, and after all the motorcycle hubbub, they never applied for a permit.
They never did?
No.
Oh, okay.
We've seen nothing from them. So I just thought the council should know. I thought that was important, especially after that particular meeting. We've seen nothing from them as far as asking for it. So I thought everybody should know that. So.
Good. I appreciate knowing that.
Kurt?
Thank you. Given that we do have a number of budgetary questions on our mind and things that you're evaluating and those kinds of things, I thought it'd be helpful to have some of our outside agency partners come in and talk to you a little bit, given that we have a new council, if you will. One of those partners is Advanced Casper, and as you are probably aware, they oversee and conduct a lot of the economic development activities on behalf of our community and to a large part for our county and so on. And so Justin is here tonight to walk us through some of the educational efforts, if you will, in terms of the operation of his organization, but also with regard to the budget relationship that we have with his agency and how all that works. And so without further ado, Mr. Mayor, if I could turn the time over to Mr. Farley, that'd be great.
Yeah. Mr. Farley?
Where would you?
Probably.
Up here? All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for giving me the opportunity to explain what it is Advanced Casper is about. For new council members, I know some of you are obviously familiar faces and know what we do. Advanced Casper is the organization formerly known as Casper Area Economic Development Alliance, and hopefully that clears up why we're now called Advanced Casper. Just to make it less of an acronym, a little bit easier to flow. So the first thing I'd like to do is explain the structure of this. We have an Economic Development Joint Powers Board, which was created decades ago. The Economic Development Joint Powers Board is not Advanced Casper. They're a completely separate entity. They have their own resources that they've accumulated over time. It fluctuates. They're the reason that there's a McMurray Training Center. They're the reason that there's way back when the Boise Cascade Call Center. So they were a conduit, or they were established to be a conduit for state dollars to flow into projects in our community. So they have their own resources and they have their own board. The board is made up of 2 county commissioners, 2 council members, and a head, the chairman, who is Mark Pepper. So I am their employee, or I contract with the Economic Development Joint Powers Board on behalf of Advanced Casper to do economic development. So that I want to just explain as that they are a separate entity, and then I'm going to go through some Advanced Casper, what we did last year and what we're looking to do following up. So with that in mind, the dollars that come from the city and the county from the franchise tax that flows to Economic Development Joint Powers Board, 96% of those dollars flows to Advanced Casper to cover operations. 4% of it stays with the EDJPB to cover their audit expenses, the attorney fees, contracts, things of that nature. Of that 96%, 65% of my organization, 65% of that expenses in staff, roughly 20% in operations, again, attorneys, contracts, rent, and then 15% is in marketing. So in addition to this, there's another entity that's Advanced Casper, and we'll refer to it as Advanced Casper Private, which is made up of business owners and members of our community that pay a membership fee to be a part of our organization. We have investment level board members. We have, currently we're pushing 100 members. 4 years ago, that was 35. So we're very happy with the participation that we're getting from our business community, and that's what we're really about. We're not here to recruit over the top of our existing businesses. We're here to help them expand, grow, prosper, and recruit things that might be a good fit to what we're already doing as a community. So, I want to just be clear. So we have EDJPB, their own entity. We have Advanced Casper, how the city funds and county funds flow for our operations, and then we have another stack that is Advanced Casper Private. So these are some of the examples of what EDJPB has done in the past and in the future, foreseeable future, in a supporting role. So David Street Station, this is a bit of an anomaly. This last year during COVID, they voted to pay the rent for the chillers at the ice rink. It was discussed that the last thing we needed was fewer things for our community to do during the pandemic. So they're the reason that there was ice on for David Street Station. Proud to host the best. This is familiar to the city. Visit Casper. We all pool our resources to make sure this continues in our community. A big boost in the arm. CNFR saying AOPA, which was going to be a great opportunity. Unfortunately, that's on hold. Big fly-in. I'm sure you guys are familiar with it. Choose Casper. That's our new digital identity, as it were, for our community, and I will get in more depth with that here momentarily. This Casper Startup Challenge. For years, the L. Bogan Foundation was a huge part of the Startup Challenge, which, if you're not familiar with, is Wyoming entrepreneurs that enter into a contest. They have money at the end of it to help grow Wyoming companies. So it's a nice fit for EDJPB, and they stepped up when the L. Bogan Foundation stepped up and are a major sponsor of that. Our PA Pathfinder Institute is another example of how we operate. They operate. I'm responsible for bringing them deals, and this is an example of that. So these are more charitable contributions. There's not a real return to that, or philanthropy. The Pathfinder Institute is an example of another function that the EDJPB works in, and that is they agreed to lend money to a company, our PA Pathfinder Institute, that built an online, if you're familiar with Array out of Cheyenne, they have Coder. Okay, so this is similar to that, but it's around robotics. It's RPA systems, basically. So it's a robotic, something automation where you program the robotics to go through databases of your existing platform to pull information that's relevant to if you're checking into a hospital or if your accounts receivable. They have a full class right now. They're a Class 1 institution in the state of Wyoming. They have their instructor who's outside of the state, but they're all founded here. So those loan terms, it's a favorable interest rate over a term, but it has a return. So that we don't deplete the pool of cash that they have by just being a granting organization. We're trying to balance that more so that you're obviously not giving away more than you're receiving. So now we're going to switch over to Advanced Casper, which is the private side, not the operations side, but the Advanced Casper full board. So EDJPB has a 5-member board. I have a 30-member board. That's Advanced Casper. So these are some of the things that we accomplished in 2020. We sold a spec building, which was prior to my coming on board. They had it for a great number of years. It was a priority to get rid of that. It was just sitting empty and costing us money. We also finalized on a piece of property near the airport for the crude derail that this organization was responsible for helping with that. I would shout out to our older board member, Ron Wright, who, before he retired, spearheaded this and made it all happen. So then we purchased Create Wyoming platform, which was Dr. McGinley's platform that he used to do equity crowdfunding to fund his orthopedic drill. It is it's a new, relatively new program through the Secretary of State that allows accredited and non-accredited investors that, if you reside in Wyoming, can participate in this. And I'll go into a little more depth with that in a bit. We, as Advanced Casper, are the administrator and facilitator of Breakthrough 307, which is the state's only organized angel investment group. We fully deployed Fund 1 into 11 different companies. We assisted Bride for 8, which is a venture capital firm. The founding partners out of Jackson, has a phenomenal background in biosciences. And this is another, what we're trying to bring to Casper, Wyoming, is kind of privatizing economic development. We don't have the luxury of other states where they throw money at companies to get them to come here. We have to be a little bit more creative on our side, which is fine. And I'll get into more detail there. We collaborated with that Choose to Casper, again, the digital identity of Casper. Prior to that, if you Google search Casper, you got all sorts of different content. The Choose Casper site, Choose CPR, is made up of ambassadors that you can reach out to them personally. They have their personal contact information. If you have a specific interest that you want to explore, you can contact that ambassador, which is a community member. It's not to look like anything that's, driven by the chamber or the city or anything like that. It's a grassroots community effort to get people that were exploring our community digitally, which was happening a lot during the pandemic, to give them that contact and give them those people to talk to. It's been an extraordinarily successful, and this is a public-private collaboration. We had true companies, Flow State, Visit Casper, and Advanced Casper, any JPB that all participated in this. Jared, who heads up Flow State, brought it up as an issue as he's recruiting tech workers to our community, that they were not finding the content online that would support moving to our community, like what our school systems are like, what is there to do, what's the livability, all of the stuff that you would do as a family member or somebody that's looking at a new community. So we brought FCR, the communications to Casper. They're a call center. I assure you they're not the call center that's asking you about your car warranty. They're completely different. About 90% of their business model is help desk. They have a litany of different businesses that they represent. So if you have an issue with a product and you call, that most likely is going to be a FCR employee that you're talking to. They, as of October, had over 50 employees that they hired here in Casper and 75 employees across the state. So that's a new company. We had our Consider Casper campaign during the pandemic. We targeted businesses in the Front Range that identified as aerospace and defense. Were there for over 10 years. The thinking behind that is we had a very successful aerospace and defense event back in 19. We wanted to piggyback on that, in addition to the massive growth that the Front Range has been experiencing. If you were a company that had been there for 10 years, yet the reasons that you moved to Colorado 10 years ago, it doesn't resemble the same place. The accessibility to the mountains, to the river, and all the rec, the stuff that we totally enjoy here in Casper, Wyoming, that stuff, it doesn't exist for a lot of the people in the Front Range any longer, and we thought it was a great opportunity to start pulling them a little bit further north. Right? So Cheyenne, if you're economic development in Cheyenne, it looks a little different, right? Because you just have this overflow of people massively coming from Colorado because they're busting at the seams. So we wanted to draw them a little bit further north with the emphasis on aerospace and defense. we don't have an aerospace and defense real stronghold here. It's something that our companies, that we have the skill set and the businesses, the fact we could build anything that you want, and it was viewed as being complementary to our existing business community. The site selector, it was a governor's edition. I like that. It had a profile of our governor, and instead of it being Leeds or Cheyenne, it was Casper, Wyoming. That was a good win there. Got a new staff, moved offices, cut our budget last year to show solidarity with the city as all the stuff that you guys were going through. Even though we're attached to a franchise, it just is the right thing to do. We have a great partnership, work very collaboratively with the city. We won an Economic Development Administrative Office Innovation Grant, the first of its kind ever awarded to Wyoming. With that, we hired an equity analyst. And what's important here is that Goose, this gentleman, the only gentleman other than myself, he is not part of the 96% of the operations that we use from those county and city dollars. We created his position via our private, Advanced Casper Private, our business membership money that we matched with that $176,000, and that's how we created that position. So it's no way reflected in the earlier slide. We built that position. So looking forward, we are going to have a comprehensive marketing plan for Casper. Casper, so there is no entity outside of Casper, or really for the state for that matter, that is effectively marketing our state, let alone our community outside of Wyoming. And this has become pretty glaringly apparent. We really very much are going to operate like the city of, or the state of Natrona County, as it were, and promote our community specifically to specific industries that we believe we have strengths in, as opposed to relying on somebody just to fund us. We have a litany of events that we do. We're going to continue to recruit businesses. We are going to work a little more collaboratively with the other largest community in Wyoming. There are definitely strengths and weaknesses that we both have and that we can identify and be advocates for either. So if Betsy and Cheyenne, they have data centers. They've got the infrastructure, they've marketed it, there's a reason they haven't come up here. It's not that it's not a natural fit for that. We may in fact get some of those, but that's something that they've identified as something that they're going after, and we don't particularly compete with that. We support that, and then in turn they turn a lot of manufacturing leads and some other stuff to our area because that's our strengths. It's really just, you can't be everything to everybody. So our comprehensive marketing plan. So this is a Choose Casper, which I've kind of beaten into the ground. However, it's a community page that you can connect with an individual community member, an ambassador, to explore the livability, the school systems, all of that. In addition to this, at the tab at the top, we're going to have something that's a headline for business, or a tab for business. Because after all, what's behind business but ownership, and ownership is made up of people. So this is going to be a one-stop shop for anybody exploring our community for moving here for a job or moving here to create jobs. On that, it's going to be emphasizing all of the things that make us unique. So we have a foreign trade zone, the only one in the state. We have the only international airport, only one in the state. We have an opportunity zone that's extraordinarily attractive. We have all the things that set us apart so that when they click on that, they can get that type of information. In addition to our no taxes and all the stuff that we're all very aware of, there's certain things that we stand out from. We're going to continue our Consider Casper campaign. This reshoring campaign, really good, that leverage that free trade zone, or AKA a foreign trade zone. Our qualified opportunity zone, which is a big part of our the Ride for 8 venture capital group. That was very attractive to bring people here to build that community because of our opportunity zone. Feels like I'm missing something here. So our events for this year, we had an entrepreneur boot camp, first time online. We generally have that in person. We have our succession course. We're going to do an investors conference in collaboration with the Breakthrough 307, the Angel Investment Group, Impact 307, and Black Hills Angel Group. We have our aerospace and defense, which we'd like to revisit. We were going to do it last year, but due to the pandemic, we backed off of that. Our federal delegation has been very supportive of that and helps us get the right contractors, the people that are here, and at their opinion, we backed off of it just because we couldn't do it in person, and we thought after having a wildly successful event that we didn't want to come out and fall short. These are some of the projects that we are working on currently. Things are picking up a little bit. So these are all anonymous leads that come from the state. These are all packets that we've put together. They're a bit ambiguous and they're a bit vague in that they don't get too specific as to what they need, but generally we'll provide them with property, we'll provide them with some favorable loan structures or things that we can do as an organization to help them out. In addition to that, we ourselves, through our relationships and our efforts, have identified 8 new businesses that we're currently working on, 2 of which have just moved here. EVI, which is he builds femoral artery stents. He was part of our bioscience conversation. He likes Casper, or he likes Wyoming, loves Casper, has some connections back here through family. So he's brought his manufacturing here and his business. They just bought a house. They just moved here on April 1st. RPA was another connection that we had just made that is now a business that's in Casper, Wyoming. And this really is to emphasize that we need to market our own community as opposed to lean on this side of the equation, because this is just, they throw it out there, everybody does a proposal, and we haven't had any real success with that. We want to be able to target our companies that we look at and control a little bit of the narrative, just so that we don't get run over like every other community. When people decide to move in, I mean, I grew up in Eastern Oregon, I've lived in Montana, I have family in Colorado. If you would have told me 10 years ago, 20 years ago when I moved here, that our state wouldn't grow, I'd have told you you're crazy, but it hasn't. So I think that is an indication of the lack of us marketing our own community and staying outside of the state. What you're doing. These are, this is my executive board, investment level board. These folks in groups pay an amount to have that. Have a phenomenal board, including the mayor. He is an appointed member. Dr. Devine from the college, Eric Schlitt from Impact 307. Community members that, or community partners that really help drive this organization. And that's it. So hopefully I talked fast enough. We have time for questions. I know that I would like to emphasize our effort on the equity side of things, where we bought the platform, the Invest 307 platform, which is accredited and non-accredited investors. That's kind of the foundation of that. We have the Angel Investment Group on top of that, and then our venture capital, which is be the peak of that, which the 3 of those didn't exist in Wyoming. So if you are a young entrepreneur and you had a good idea and you needed funding to grow your idea, you had no option but to leave. You had to go to Colorado to use the Rocky Mountain Venture Capital. You had to go to Silicon Valley to get the money to do that. So what we're trying to do is recreate that. We're not building anything new. It exists in other states. It just hasn't existed here. And we were losing our young talent and businesses because of the lack of that. So angel investment, not every company fits in that. So the goal with Invest 307 is, hey, if you don't meet the criteria that the angel investment group would like to see, like scalable tech, whatever that might be, we have another option for you where Wyoming residents can invest in Wyoming companies. And you can do it $500 at a time to $15,000 at a time, and you can raise up to $4 million. So those two are really what the equity analyst oversees, Goose, who vets those companies, assists those companies in getting to those platforms, and then the angel investment or the venture capital is the tip of that. Because after angel investment is ordinarily first money in, along with equity financing. But once you get to a mature point and you need more money, like tens of millions of dollars, that's where the venture capital comes in. So I just want to explain that as that is the effort that we have, or the hole we've tried to plug with with those programs. So, and that it's outside of the operations of what the city and county provides Advanced Casper.
Any questions? Councilman Neal.
I have two, if you would, please.
You bet.
First off, I'd like to ask you how many employees you got?
I have 3.
So,
Well, excuse me, myself and 2 others.
so 65% of your pie is going to 3 of you guys.
Yes.
And the new position you created with Goose is being funded through your grant and your private, but at some point you're gonna have to pick that up unless you continue to get grants, correct?
Yeah, after 3 years, which is what we have budgeted, that position ceases to exist. So in that 3-year period of time, we need to find either another funding source. So the overall goal of that particular position is that, again, this hasn't been done before in Wyoming, so nobody was doing it.
Right.
Somebody had to. We stepped up and we did it. What I believe will happen is that the state at some point will be like, geez, that looks like a really good idea, and that we should probably have that. So I think the state would probably get involved at some point, and then it would not be an Advanced Casper or anything, it would be some separate entity.
How much do we fund them?
About 420 grand.
But that's not your total budget.
Pretty close.
It is?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, it's pretty close.
I'm just thinking out loud, but that just seems really labor heavy, or very expensive. You know, if 65% of your budget is going to 3 people, I'm just thinking out loud, that's, as a businessman, that just seems a little off tilt to me.
So prior to my coming on, it was almost 75% of it, and I eliminated a position that was as a part of the consolidation with the city.
How much is your marketing budget? How much do you typically spend a year?
Well, this last year was unique with roughly 50,000. With that is trade shows. There's a bunch of different things that we had to pivot to because there was nothing that was going to be in person, and we're really pushing back towards the digital footprint.
So I'm trying to just correlate, how are you connected with Visit Casper? Or are you at all?
Not at all.
But you guys
Well,
both, they're partners, but do you both do the same thing? Are you both overlapping, or are you focused more on Natrona County and Visit Casper, strictly Casper?
Visit Casper's tourism.
Correct.
yeah.
Like
And
lodging
funded-
tax dollars.
Yeah, funded completely different, but we certainly work with them because so Visit Casper, for instance, gives to the Proud to Us the Best, the city gives Proud to Us the Best, and then EGBB, which is not my organization, they also do that. So there's some confusion as to who participates. So Economic Development Joint Powers Board is the one that participates in it.
Councilman Gamros.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the presentation, Justin. I think my question's probably for the city manager more than anyone, I would guess. And it's more about, I guess, economic development in general. I've heard for years these analyses from the Wyoming Tax Policy Organization, I forget their actual name, but you know, showing that every citizen pays $3,000 in taxes, gets $30,000 in services, and this organization has stated that for every resident that moves here that isn't in the oil and gas industry, we're actually losing money as a state. I'm curious to know, the city of Casper, are we in a similar position? You know, if that's the case for the state, is that also the case for the city because of the way things are structured, or is that, you know, a little bit different at a municipal level?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Gamroth, in terms of that ratio, is that what you're asking? Yeah.
Yeah, just whether the amount of services that, for every new resident, the amount that they cost in services, are we reaping at least that much through sales tax and property tax and, you know, whatever other revenue generation we have?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Gamroth, I would say our ratio is probably a little worse. Because from a sales tax perspective, citizens of Casper pay a proportionately pretty small piece of that pie. A lot of our, which is the bulk of our, certainly our general fund, but what we don't receive is a lot of the property taxes that a citizen would pay in our community. And so, from a general services standpoint, I would tell you that it's probably a little more off-kilter, imbalanced, if you will. But to give you an analysis that says what that is exactly, like the state has done from a statewide perspective, I would be ill-prepared to give you something like that.
Thank you.
I would just add to that, from an economic development standpoint, the solution is not shrinking. So you just can't approach a business or an interested party with, you know, we can't afford to have you. I mean,
Sure.
that's something that's going to have to be addressed at the state level. I'm sorry, Councilman Mel, did you have two questions? Did I answer your
Yes, you did. I just can't get over looking at that first pie you put up there, and I mean, as a businessman, it just doesn't
Mr. Mayor,
compute with me.
If I could answer for you.
Pardon me?
I'm Mike Stepp.
You okay with Mike talking?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I'm vice chairman of Advance Casper, and that's why I'm here. I can address a little bit on the salary. As Justin said, that is almost our entire budget on the public side. We do operate in way of giving, presenting opportunities or using private dollars that's outside of that. None of that goes to salary that I'm aware of, except for the one with Mr. Goose. The wages have declined in the tenure I've had over the last 7 years with the board. And prior to that, we were having to recruit outside of Casper, which meant spending quite a bit more. Sometimes, you know, if you're trying to recruit somebody that's at a high level, you spend a lot. And also the people that work for them, you tend to spend a lot. And we've been able to lower that. Fortunately, we've had Justin and our previous director both wanted to be in Casper, lived in Casper, had a connection to Casper. We were able to actually lower those wages. So as high as it sounds, Casper the economic development operated on a much higher budget than that.
And I understand that where I want you to understand from my point of view, as our constituents are watching this or looking at this, and we're using taxpayer money to fund Advance Casper, and they look at that pie and see that 65% of the funding we're giving in taxpayer money is going to salaries, which only leaves 35% to really Advance Casper. That's, if you're looking at the pie, that's exactly what it looks like. So I hope you understand.
I understand, I've been in business for 45 years myself. I know what you're talking about. I also know that in a service business, typically 65 to 75% of your salary is, your expenses are salary. And so, it would be great if we had that $1 million instead of 400,000. It's not going to happen. And the reason that budget is 65% of what we have is because the pie is small, not because of what we're taking out of the pie. That's my point of view.
And as much as we beat down on the salary side, and I've run a couple businesses, and I understand where you're coming from. What I've noticed in my time here is as we beat down the salary, it would seem that the health coverage increases. So I think that side of it is something that we could probably look at to save ourselves on that. That includes that. It's just the overall package.
I'm not opposed to anybody making a good salary. I hope you don't misunderstand me there. I'm just more,
I don't disagree with you. I'm looking solely from the position of competition and recruitment. And I'd be willing to yield the floor to Councilman Pollock and sit down and shut up.
Councilmember Pollock.
So I think the thing that we're missing is that a lot of the funds that actually advance Casper are leveraged private dollars. So we've not got a picture of the complete budget. Like that, those monies don't include any of the projects that actually get executed. That just includes payroll. That's just operations. That's payroll, rent, and letting people know what it is. All of the money that actually executes projects is coming from the private side. So the $450,000 that we put in goes to leverage many, 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 many more dollars of private contribution and grant funding that comes in to that organization as well. So it looks skewed only because we're only looking at part of the budget. We're not looking at the entirety of what dollars go into the projects that Advance Casper executes.
Yeah,
Correct?
Very fair. That side of the balance sheet is private, as far as what our contributions are and what the private sector is putting in.
well, just as a suggestion, next time you come, to me, it would seem like you might want to throw the whole budget out there so we have a better idea, because what you presented and what it looks like is not what it is in the first place, and secondly, it doesn't look real good. So my opinion would be throw the whole budget out there so we know what the hell's going on, and that really there's a lot of private dollars that are coming into play and everything else, which after watching your presentation I had no idea. So that's why the questions.
No, I appreciate the input.
Don't-
There's a lot of content.
Councilwoman Lutz.
Just really quick, I'm just gonna point out this is a service organization, and so therefore there's no cost of goods sold. There's no widgets being made, there's no oil being pumped, there's no vehicles coming out. There is just human services coming out. So even though it says 65% salary, you're not taking into account the productivity that each of those employees are putting out, because that's not how a budget works. It doesn't show you the productivity that those employees are generating or creating.
Vice Mayor Pacheco.
Thank you, Mayor. This is a comment, not a question for you, Justin, but I jump on your website and I look at your members for Advance Casper, and I know there's been certain people that have criticisms because of certain things, and if looking at that member list of some of the most respected businesses and organizations in Casper felt that way about Advance Casper, they wouldn't be on Advance Casper if they felt negative about that. So your reputation precedes you. It's just, I think there's some voices that maybe perhaps don't understand or see what you're trying to do and how you're doing that. And I think that it's critical for our community to understand what you guys are doing and how you're doing that. And looking at your list and to see the reputable organizations and businesses in this community that are on your board, that work with you guys and support you, says a lot. And I hope that the community understands that. And you're always going to have critics. You're always going to have the people that are going to sit and say X, Y, and Z or whatever. But the proof is in the pudding, and to me that means a lot. And that's why I've continued to support Advance Casper. That's why I've been on EDJBP to help out with that, to do those things to create an economic diverse population, which to say it right now, as the legislature has failed in multiple ways to diversify our economy. And that's a true statement. And you cannot cut your way out of an economic downturn. So they can continue to try to cut, but they have not had no answers. But you guys are working on that, and I appreciate that.
Thank you. And I have an excellent board, and they absolutely keep me accountable. And to your point, if we have an issue that's at the state level, that board represents probably 60, 70% of the people that are employed in Natrona County. So if the governor doesn't take Justin Farley's call, but he'll take Stu Tanner's.
Exactly.
And he'll get that point across, that what's important for us as a business community, that's our avenue. It's that board. So thank you for pointing that out.
Yep.
I guess kind of some of my concern, and I think that maybe there might be some avenues to look at, nothing against you guys. It's just that I own my own business, and honestly, $50,000 is a drop in the bucket. You're not gonna get much done for $50,000. You're just simply not. I know what advertising costs. So trying to put out that economic outlook out there, trying to bring companies in there, I think that you're literally only looking at a couple different avenues for 50 grand. So I don't know have you explored additional grants or anything like that to help with some of that marketing?
Yes. So in that pie chart represents the more than $80,000 that we took out of our budget to give back to the city last year. So this year, those dollars that we peeled off for that are not going to go for another position. They're going to go to marketing. They're going to go to specifically getting our community outside of this, outside of Wyoming, and promoting it. So you're at 50. I'm very happy with what we accomplished with what we did, which is why the EDGBB on the other side of that, they participated and helped developing that website, because you couldn't do it for 50 minutes. Right? In Advanced Casper, in private, with Flow State, it took all of us to do that. So that's
right.
You're exactly right. It doesn't go very far.
Councilmember Pollock.
I have two questions. So you talked about one company that has hired 50 new employees in Casper. Can you talk a little bit about what type of KPI you have for this coming year in terms of job target? And the other thing I'm interested in is what sectors are you targeting? Last I heard, I know aerospace and defense, I know medical, community, advanced manufacturing, those sorts of things. So can you talk about currently, what are your targets in terms of industry sector as well?
So without getting like real specific, manufacturing certainly, and I've worked with Carter and to also entice those companies to come here. So that we see as a real strength. The medical device, so bioscience is another big part of that we're trying to get, and that's using private dollars to entice in the $100 million venture capital. If you're a relatively mature company and you're in need of that $100 million, but you have to move to an opportunity zone either in Casper, Wyoming, or somewhere else in the country, to be fair, to get the funding, that's private incentive to bring companies here. So, economic development used to be that handout, and like, hey, we need a grant, or we need some money, and we're really trying to pivot that to be a more of a private model. So that's a big emphasis. Medical with Banner being here now, with the CEO of Banner is a new board member. We are going to see how we can help them going forward, because the medical center is a giant part of our community. Dr. Devine from Casper College. We have a new PhD that moved to town. That was part of the conversation originally with around the bioscience. He's opening 2 businesses here, two separate companies. I introduced him to Darren. He might help out academically. The aerospace and defense is another huge part of this, where we would love to have some type of a company that identifies in aerospace and defense that would locate here to be a prime of sorts, that our manufacturers can help build things. In Colorado, they do $50 billion worth of aerospace work. Utah does 10 billion, 50 billion, 10 billion. Wyoming does 100 million. So you can even break that down to per person, and we're completely being overlooked. A big part of that also with Colorado and all their expansion, they already had a real job issue, but you add the layer of, if you build the door that keeps the astronaut on the inside of the space vessel, and you're that company, you have to have a very stringent drug policy, right? And so Colorado is making their workforce issues worse with their legislation. So we see that as an extraordinary opportunity that we can build it. And we're not talking about making it 100% of your bottom line if you're a company here, but if it's 10 or 15% and you experience a downturn in energy that we're experiencing, it helps you get through that. And it's a foreign trade zone is another completely overlooked asset that we have for distribution, for warehousing, for manufacturing, for a whole bunch of e-commerce. There's a ton of things that we are going to target that. And I would encourage at our next quarterly breakfast, which is coming up, we're going to have Dale, our customs agent, and Glenn, the head of the airport, come and talk to our membership about foreign trade zone and how we can leverage it. So that's our target. So,
Yeah.
as far as specific number of jobs, we're working on one now that could be a complete game changer. And it's fun to talk about stuff like that. But these things, you can work on them for 6 months and they go away, or 2 years. But we have a lot of good leads. We are certainly not flying under the radar. COVID, if there's been anything positive about it, is really we've had more people interested in both our conservative way of life and our business atmosphere. There's a couple things that I can guarantee you. You're going to experience some wind in winter. You're not going to have your job interrupted or be late because of a riot. It's just not happening. So that's attractive. People are fed up.
Councilwoman Ingbridge.
So for this aerospace and things, this is what I can see, is that if you're looking at bringing a company here, we do not have the employees that's going to be able to staff that. So how do you take a guy from the oil field, and where do you get the money to train him to work in aerospace now? Because obviously we have coal miners and all of that that's going to be out of work. But we do have an education problem too. So you might need to couple that with some kind of an education program to retrain. And that might be with workforce services or something of that nature. But do you understand what I'm kind of saying?
I do, and we don't view as much as a coal industry and heavy equipment operators as we view in our own area the fabricators here, the high pressure tank vessel builders, all the fab shops around here. Again, they've built things that you can fly into space. They just when energy's in town, it just, that you would be foolish as a business owner not to pay attention to the palette of money in the middle of the table called energy. It just hasn't been something that they do. I would challenge you that we do have the skill set here in Wyoming to build whatever you want. For instance, at L&H in Gillette, they provided huge equipment for the coal mines for years, and they pivoted to where they were building the tracks that moved the space shuttle out onto the launch pad. Just monstrous, great stuff. So we had experience doing it in the state. We just want to bring it here.
I was just talking more along the technical side of things. It's just, so I've worked in the trucking industry, and I know that workforce services, and you have the TANF grants, and then the people come through, and then you put them through. And so it was an effort that came through from the state with the training programs to retrain people. So it was just, so to get them into a different career type thing. So not, obviously, some of the manufacturing can be done, but not all of those. So to be completely transparent and say, okay, we want aerospace is very technical as well. And so that is an aspect that I think would be a huge benefit to the state, because we don't have stuff like that. But you have tons of people, that the younger generation that is leaving the state to do. So if we were to talk with the state and try to get the funding, I'm sure that there's federal dollars out there to re-educate people and then bring in that, because I think the technical piece is what Wyoming's missing.
Yes, I agree. I think that goes also back to Councilman Pollock's comment about a targeted audience, tech. So if you look around at outside of aerospace and defense, if you look at Montana, Colorado, and Utah, they all were pretty dependent on mining and energy extraction, and they've all diversified their economy using tech and medical. So again, we're just a little behind that eight ball, but you're spot on. That's a community here that we need to grow.
Any other questions, Mr. Farland? Okay. Thank you, Justin. I appreciate what you do.
Thank you guys. And gals.
Anything else on that? Okay. We'll move on to, I think this was Councilman Nell that got this on the list. It's Fort Casper seasonal hours and closure, Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A number of years ago, as a part of a number of initiatives that staff researched and prepared to contain costs and to bring some very needed savings to the table for council to consider. One of them was a seasonal closure proposal of the Fort Casper facilities during the times that the demand for their services from among the public was among the absolute lowest throughout the year. At the time that the proposal was put together and the analysis was done and the thoughts were organized and whatnot, it was anticipated that for the general fund, of which the fort is what I would consider a dependent fund upon the general fund, we anticipated that we could save somewhere in the neighborhood of $160,000 to $170,000 a year just by closing the fort for a portion of the year, not the whole year or forever, but for a portion of the year. Pursuant to the request of council, we have dusted off that analysis again and looked at it again and tried to determine whether or not those assumptions made 4 years ago would apply to today. And for that answer, now that I've given you a sweet build-up, I will defer to Mr. Cortez.
All right, for the sake of time, Mr. Mayor and Council, I'm not going to go through. This presentation was basically the same presentation some of you may have seen about 3 years ago when we brought this forth before. So I'm going to kind of go through it pretty fast for the sake of those that, and I don't remember if Councilman Kathy was present for this one or not, but I know that Councilman Johnson and Councilman Pacheco were probably in place at the time. So we just kind of revamped the numbers. It's all in your packet. If there's any questions you have over what I kind of gloss over, please hit me up. Basically, I think Carter did a great job of going kind of over what we're talking about. We were just kind of talking about when the numbers slough off for attendance is kind of what we were thinking we'd shut down. So there's a great graph in here, and I didn't do that.
It's a good looking graph.
Yeah.
My favorite.
The late TV actually just got turned off.
Yeah, I think you turned off the TV.
I didn't turn off the TV.
You're the only one with the remote.
I got a remote, but it's not the remote. Probably shut down just from time to time.
We'll get you some help, Tim. Why don't you go ahead and continue?
All right, so anyways, it's in your packet, and I got all this fairly memorized, being this round 2. The attendance numbers slough off when you start getting into the fall months. They basically nosedive off. And so they stay that way throughout the winter time. And
Thanks, Keith.
Chief.
Police and
Right,
IT.
not with any kind
Look
of
at that.
lethal
Met many
force.
Two for one.
Yeah, right? So basically in October, you see it just kind of makes this slough off, and of course this is on a fiscal year, which is why you kind of see this U shape in here. And then it doesn't really start picking up again until you get into the spring months, and of course summers are busiest months when people are they're traveling through to go to Yellowstone and what have you. The reason that you see this Natrona County School District contribution is when I first made this proposal back in 18, the school district was a pretty big partner for us. I mean, they paid for half of a Fort educator to kind of come in and help teach the kids about, you know, the fort and the history behind it and all that, which was a great partnership. The school district, however, due to their budget constraints, said, we're good, you know, we don't want to do this anymore. We need those dollars back. And so when they backed out, the city then said, well, we don't want to fund the whole position. We backed out. That's the only reason you see these different graphs. Skip through. The graphs all show kind of the same thing, which is this, you know, whether it's revenue or expenditures even, they kind of take a little ebb and a flow here and there. Here's regarding just expenditures. So you'll see some kind of peaks and valleys here. And the reason that we have some of these is we have bigger events that'll peak out. So for instance, you come to October and we'll have our ghost tours and stuff, you know, which is a very heavily attended. It's cool, you know. And then you get into December and we'll do Candlelight Christmas, and it'll bump up our revenue a little bit and stuff that help us with our expenditures. So you'll see that offset. This is super small, so I'm not gonna go through too much on this, other than one of the big changes I have to tell you about, and it's in my memo, is that when we proposed this back in 18, we had a good spot for those employees to shuffle out to during the seasonal closure, meaning Chief McFeeters raised his hand and said, hey, I have EvTech positions that are vacant. We can, you know, curation of objects, you can imagine, kind of lent itself to the thought process. Like, we'll get them over to PD, we'll fill that hole, we'll get them off of, you know, Fort Casper, Parks and Rec's Dole, we'll get them on PD, and then it'll help out with that operation. That would take this $140,000 that, this is all new numbers now. That would take that $140,000 that could displace a portion of that, if we took all 3 full-time employees, shifted them over to, say, the PD, you save the $140,000 plus any operational costs, which are captured right here, which is to the tune of just over $12,000. The problem nowadays is I went back to the chief and said, hey, do you still have opportunities there? He said, I don't have opportunities. So I opened up the discussion to all of my colleagues and said, hey, any other department, do you see any need where we could move those people on a seasonal basis, get them into your operation, you pick up the budget on the personnel side of the budget for them, and then I need them back come, you know, when things start ramping up in March and April. and it was crickets. No one has anything for really those people to shift into. So that to me is probably the biggest, by far the biggest conundrum that we currently face revisiting this topic 3 years later now. Because I don't have any place to really shift that $140,000 like I did previously. Anyways, the rest, I'm not going to read through a lot of this stuff. This just kind of talks about a lot of the cost savings that we could incur, you know, postage, shipping, you know, it's just little stuff, but it, you know, it adds up to about $12,000 if you don't count on the personnel. The personnel is the big, just like my previous person that was speaking, you know, from Advanced Casper, it's personnel is kind of where the big money lies. And so you got to figure out what to do with that piece to really realize the savings. Here's just a quick slide on the grants that, so they do work on grants in the wintertime. And I got to be really fair to my staff. They do not just sit around, you know, doing nothing in the wintertime. I mean, they are building exhibits and they are booking stuff for their busy season, and they're curating objects. You know, people are always bringing stuff into the fort and saying, hey, you know, my grandpa left this. Is it, you know, something you're interested in? They got to research that stuff. And a lot of times the answer is no, not interested. But sometimes the answer is like, yeah, we'd love to have that in our collection. And they work out agreements with folks and stuff like that. So there's a lot of back-end work that happens in the wintertime. There just isn't many people walking through the door to visit. And we really don't see that really ramp up until we get into the summer months. Kind of just this is kind of just a summary of what I just kind of explained to you. And I'll probably leave this up. But this group is, you know, always comes up with some, you know, pretty good ideas. And so, you know, if you have, I think that's probably the crux for me is what do we do with those three? Or back then we kind of relented. You know, we got a pretty big outpouring for those people that were, you know, around when we did this back in 18. A lot of people showed up for the discussion. I mean, it was quite the deal. And I would imagine it would be the same way this time around. I just wish all those people that showed up to speak out against the idea back then would show up to the museum in the wintertime, you know, and kind of help us get through those tough times. So anyways, with that, I'd kind of go for questions or comments or any ideas.
Councilmember Pollock.
Talked to somebody from the museum, and she was alluding to some new programs that they were working on implementing. Had a delay in that this last year due to COVID. Can you elaborate on any of the programming that ideas that were thrown around, or maybe, you know, proposals that were fully in the works pre-COVID that we might expect to see this year to kind of help fill in some of the off-season types of attendance?
Mr. Mayor, Council Member, I'll kind of hit that from probably a higher level real quick than what you're probably thinking. That's a cost recovery entity, and so we set goal. Council helped us set goals back in 2018 as to what we wanted to strike for a cost recovery for that operation. Basically, at that time, we set a resolution to try to gain 20 cents on every dollar that's expended, so 20% cost recovery, which is by far the lowest in Parks and Recreation. As a result of that discussion, it was kind of like a goal to attain. We've hit around 19 cents on the dollar. We've never hit the 20 cents on the dollar. Last year we hit 14 cents on the dollar, it was 2020. So the staff, you're probably looking for something really specific, I think, but I don't have the specifics. I'd have to lean on them for that. But they are always working on trying to find ways to draw people into that facility, especially in the wintertime, because that's where they're struggling. Some of it resonates, some of it does not. You know, I speak to people out in the public, you know, we've all, you know, a lot of us have grown up here, and you just sometimes get the discussion with people and they just go, well, I've been there before. And once you kind of been there, you kind of been there, you know. And then there's other people that are like, hey, you know, I went and I saw their postcard exhibit and it was fantastic, and they brought it from Gillette and traveled around the state. And it just depends on if it's your bag of tea, you know, it's your cup of tea or not, it really dictates how successful those things are. But I will hand it to my staff. They're always looking for ways to draw people in. It's just sometimes, it's kind of like the event center. Sometimes people show up, sometimes they don't. You're just like, ugh. That's the best I can do, but if you wanted some really hard, like, specific items, I could certainly get a list out to the council.
Councilman Nell.
Thanks, sir. Myself personally, as a council member, I'm not the micromanaging type. That's why we have you to do this job. But as a businessman, when you look at this on paper, if I'm running a business like this, and from November to literally April, I'm not making any money, I'm closing my business during that particular time. And if that means we lay people off and they can come back in the spring, then that's what we do. I don't believe it's prudent to hold people or to hold the city hostage by saying, well, we got to keep these people employed. No, we don't. And unfortunately, I'm the guy that's going to say it, but if you don't have enough money to pay the bills, you got to do something different. And that's where we're at now. And I know this group of people is probably the most impassioned group literally over anything we will talk about. These people are very passionate about this. I understand their passion and I get it. But like you said, they want to sit there and yell at the city and say, you've got to stay open and these people need to keep their jobs. But in the wintertime, they're not showing up and paying at the door to help cover those expenses. So we have a certain amount of money that's got to go out and we don't have enough coming in to cover it. Something has to give. And Carter, I know you and I have had this conversation. I was the one that started this whole thing because we as a city are getting low on funding. We still want to provide great services to our community. We have got to make cuts in certain spots. And if we make the appropriate cut here and shut the place down when nobody's going, literally, it's going to save us $140,000. And that means $140,000 that's back in the general fund to continue services in other areas. And it's not like we're taking anything away from them. Nobody's coming during those times. Now I understand the heat's still got to stay on and I understand that, but we're talking about a tremendous amount of labor, and I'm not saying they're not doing things, but I don't know, the businessman in me is just saying this is not prudent, it's not right. And I'd like to know what your thoughts are on it. I understand you want to keep people working, I get that, but let's be real. What are your thoughts, I guess, concerning what I just said, since you're the head of this thing?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman, that's a terrific question. I'd probably answer it pretty simply and just say I think the museum business is not a very good business. It's not much of a business at all. I hate to be so simplistic.
No, you're absolutely right.
A complex situation is what it is, but I've asked myself this for 3 years. I look at a cost recovery of 20%, and we're like praying and we're stretching to get 20%. And I'm like, God, the museum business is just not a great business. It is a quality of life thing. It is something that people are very passionate about. And at the end of the day, I struggle with it too, with my education and stuff, it's just like, wow. But no one gets into it thinking they're going to make money. A lot of our counterparts, they're on the federal dollar, so they print their own money, so they don't even charge admission, they literally print it, yeah. So they don't even charge admission, and here we are, we're like trying to collect $2, and people are like, $2? Like, we can go to the trail center and go in for free, and it's totally true. They're printing money, we're like, begging for it as a whole city to try to get all our operations going, so. Sorry to be so simplistic, but
no, it's exactly what I was looking for, because I will tell you, I love the museum. I've been there with my own family. But like you said, once you've seen it, you've pretty much seen it. So what does that tell you? This is surviving off of tourism. And we don't have tourism November through April to speak of. So as a city, as responsible councilmen, as responsible people with our tax money, which is depleting, we've got to start making cuts in areas where it makes sense. And this is one of those, in my opinion, it just makes sense. Because it's a good way to save $150,000 or more. And we can set up a virtual tour. And so if people do want to go on and see what's going on there, they can log in during those months when the doors aren't open, and they can see what's there. And then, which might even pique more interest and get more people in the door once it's back open again. They saw something online, they want to go see it. That's just where I'm coming from, and I'm sure I'm going to get a ton of flack for this, but we've got to start being real about this money situation that we're in, and we're getting ready to come into budgets, and it's these are the very decisions that we're going to have to start making. So, and that's why I asked you where you were at on it, and it sounds to me like you get it. So.
Before I move on, and I'm not going to give you flack on it, but I am going to make a comment that I don't look at this as business, this is leisure itself. It's not business. And if we're going to take that approach, of saying that we should cut leisure out when leisure's not doing good, then are we gonna sit here and are we gonna take the event center and every other place and say, well, nothing going on today, so shut it down, send everybody home? How many people are gonna return back to work or wanna keep a job that is just gonna be there whenever it's gonna be there? So that's the only comment I gotta make on that. Councilwoman Ingram.
I have a similar viewpoint as Steve. It's just that I don't see this as a business. This is a museum. Museums, I don't think historically make money. This is a unique museum, though, to Casper. It's unique. We do not have this anywhere else in the state, and I don't think we're capitalizing on it. I have been to all these other states. Where have you been? And you see all the reenactments. Everybody's all dressed up in the period, and they're out there doing the things, you know, glass blowing, and I mean, it's cool. And so you want to be there and you want to join in. We're not doing any of that. So I don't know if we could try to get the schools in there. You know, you got 3 employees. They need to be dressed appropriately. They're dressed in civilian clothes. They should be dressed like that. I mean, we need to do
Union
things.
Army
I mean,
uniforms.
the powwows, we've got things. Start doing the reenactments. Start getting the schools involved. I think that we could do better with it. And so it's just like, I have been to tons of these places, and this museum is just lacking. It just is. I've done the Halloween. I've done the Christmas. They're just very short periods of time. I think the Halloween one could probably expand a little bit longer because there's a lot of people that do that. It's just that,
Make it overnight.
yeah, you know, there's things that we can do to, I mean, this is leisure, but we can make it fun. You can make it exciting. I think stage 3 might even volunteer to even join in and be all dressed up and do the things. And because that's what they do. But I mean, reality is, anybody who works at this museum should not be dressed in today's clothing. Period. I mean, seriously, that's the whole flavor of it, isn't it? When you go there, don't you want to see cowboys and Indians? Don't you want to see what they lived like and do things? And then, you know, you kind of got a civilian walking around going, well, this is where so-and-so slipped. And, you know, I mean, they're not enthusiastic. I've done all the tours. I've drugged my kids through it. It's just kind of a thing. So, I mean, if you have the buy-in from the staff, maybe stage 3 or something, I think we can make this better. I think you can get to your 20 cents. Or $2 or whatever that you're looking for. It's just that I just think that there's a niche that we're missing. Is all. I don't think we should close it. I just think we need to capitalize on it.
Councilman Kevin.
Well, goes a little bit counter to what you had mentioned about closing things, but basically we close the golf course in the winter. We close Hogadon in the summer. So, and those are seasonal things, just like what we're talking about. This is a seasonal thing. And I don't know what the staff requirements are. You go to a big museum in a metropolitan area, and you have, I don't want to call them, you've got a curator that is involved in the artifacts and the history, and they have maybe a master's or even a PhD in whatever you call that position. I don't know what you call it, but you get the drift of where I'm headed. And I don't know as we have that here. And so do those have to be full-time positions, or do they wind up being seasonal positions, like we hire people for the rest of your parks even to take care of things? And again, could that wind up to go along with what Councilwoman is talking about, is you wind up with high school kids that in essence become tour guides, and you actually increase the revenue in the summer by having them dressed in period clothes with some enthusiasm, and you go out and tour and you get them for a reasonable cost. You don't have all the benefits, and potentially if they have some enthusiasm and stuff, I can even see people giving them tips, and so it winds up with really becoming a big deal from that standpoint. But to say that we don't close things, Yeah, we do. I'll come back to that one. Councilwoman Lutz.
So, I mean, on some level, I think maybe there's a compromise to be had here. So maybe it's the thing of, we have full-time staff when we have a lot of revenue coming in, we have a lot of attendance at the museum. But obviously, there still are functions that have to happen in the winter. Like, let's not kid ourselves. Somebody has to be checking on the grounds. Somebody has to be making sure that a water pipe hasn't burst. Somebody has to be making sure that, something hasn't gone wrong and that the artifacts are, like, being kept the way they need to be being kept. Grants need to be being applied for. So, I mean, maybe it's some sort of hybrid where, they're full-time during the busy season and maybe even part-time during the off-season and even doing some of that work from home. I mean, I think 2020 has proven that you don't have to be sitting in a desk in your office to be doing work. I'm sure a lot of these grants could be being applied for from home. So, I mean, maybe there's a compromise to be had, I guess is my point. Maybe it's not an open versus closed. Maybe there's a compromise in the middle.
Tim?
Mr. Mayor, if I could just address a couple questions real quick before we move too far. Councilman, just to answer your question, all 3 full-time employees have master's degrees, and so they do curation. You hit the nail on the head. They have a curator, they have a supervisor, and then the person that does run the front desk also has a master's degree, and they're all in their they're working in their field of study. So I hope that kind of sheds some light on that. And then
that was
yeah, it kind of to your point about like having them go somewhere else and then bring them back in is kind of a conundrum for me because they're working in their field of study with a master's degree. It's like I can roll them into say Hogadon or the ice arena when I'm hiring people, but having that person with a master's degree sitting there taking money at the ice arena, it's kind of a little bit of a struggle for
You
them.
mean you don't want to put them as a lifty up at Hogan?
Which direction? I'll give it a shot. And then to your point, Councilwoman, we kind of talked about a hybrid. If some of those folks that were here back when we talked about this in 18, the hybrid was going to be instead of all 3 people going to other places, in this case, most likely the police department, was to keep one person, probably the supervisor, there to kind of manage a lot of the stuff that you mentioned. So just so you know, that was discussed, but we still didn't get any legs under that either back in 18. So just
Councilmember Pollock.
I think you can go on. I think it's sort of, the sentiment has been captured.
We're really good at that here.
I'm just going to speak from the experience of being part of this 3-4 years ago. And so my interpretation of this is that we missed the boat because of what we should have done probably 3 or 4 years ago. And I know initially I was on board with that and supported Carter in moving forward. And we probably should have done that. They had a plan moving forward. And so now we're looking at probably having to let go of 3 master's level employees, having to go through another process of very passionate people in a museum that they care very deeply about. Had the pleasure of working with a lot of those people when I was mayor. So I feel like our opportunity has been lost. I think I'll go with the recommendation with the city. While the $100-some thousand is quite a bit of money for us, I think we just need to probably continue as is. I think we missed the boat 3 years ago. And we had a plan, and now that plan cannot be feasible. And so, unfortunately, I'm not willing to, at this point, unless we are at the very critical stages of a complete collapse of our budget, start to entertain that at this point. I think I just don't think it's probably not in our best interest. So that's kind of how I feel. And I just want to reiterate too what Steve said about the leisure services. It's our leisure services. So sorry.
Councilmember Pollock.
Piggybacking off of that, my concern would be losing specific talent. This is not just a put out a job posting and anybody can do this particular job, at least not to the level that we would like them to be doing it. So that is a concern for me. And I also want to go back to what you said earlier. I think you said our goal was 20% recovery. You said they hit 19%. To me, that means we're probably moving in the right direction to hitting the actual goal, given the fact that our numbers are down in the winter as it is. So if the goal of council is 20%, what more do we want from them than that? I mean, I suppose we could talk about raising the goal if we think there's a more appropriate number, and then talk about if we're about to hit the target as is, either the target needs to move or we shouldn't be dissatisfied, I guess is my thought.
Good point. Councilman Nell.
Thank you, sir. I'm gonna agree to disagree with you, Mayor. Everything to me is a business when we're talking about spending tax dollars. Even in the company, you have a health and wellness section. And this is part of that to me, it's leisure, I get it. But we can't compare it to the Casper Event Center. I mean, that concert they had Thursday night probably brought more money into this community than that museum will do in a year, in one night. So to me, it's not apples to apples. And I mean, I'm telling you, we haven't got into budget yet. We're gonna have to make some cuts somewhere. Something's gotta give. And when we're in a situation where this place is doing zero money for 5 months, and is there another thing we can do with those people or find a place to put them? Because we don't want to lose them. I understand that. But, I mean, these are, and I don't want people to think I'm just an axe man. Oh my God, he's just cutting everything. That's not what I'm about. I'm about being fiscally frugal and responsible. And, I mean, we've had this discussion how many times? And this is just one of them areas where we're really just bleeding for no reason other than making sure we're paying the salaries of 3 people so we don't lose them later on. So I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. I guess I just wanted to make sure that people understand I'm not out to try to cut services. I'm not out to try to axe people. I'm out to make sure that we can still provide good services for our people and stay within a budget that's shrinking. So that was why I brought this up in the very first place. And like I said, I'm going to get filleted by our public, the people that are really passionate about this, and I understand that, but I would just ask them to put themselves in our shoes and understand there's only so much money, and we have a whole lot of stuff we have to do for our community. Something's got to give. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Councilman Kathy.
The one thing I was gonna mention is I had not realized that all 3 of our employees were master level, whatever, curators, for lack of a better term. I was assuming maybe one of them was, and then the others were semi-skilled, so to speak. And so then I would figure that you could cut 2, keep the curator, and in essence hire part-time people through the summer. But that does present a different situation too when you have 3 master level people there. Because yeah, it's gonna be tough to have them go out and be lifties. I'll just use that as, but yeah. Because that's what you do, is those are your part-time people. You have your part-time people running the lawnmowers on the golf course. And yeah, we have a different level of expertise.
Councilwoman Lutz.
So maybe we're taking the wrong look at this. So maybe if the concern here is that they're quote unquote bleeding money, then maybe we give them a time frame to come to us with solutions. Say, okay, for what, like, let's decide on what the benchmark is and say, you know, you're not, whatever thing that we're looking for, you're not meeting it, you're not reaching it. So come to us with ideas, come to us with grants that you're gonna apply for, come to us with new events that you're gonna do, come to us with dressing actors in clothes, whatever it may be, and have them like come to us with actual numbers and facts with, you know, how we want them to reach that benchmark. Obviously, I don't think it's fair to say we want you to start making money. That's not realistic, and that's not how we're treating our other subsidiaries of the city. But we need to decide what that benchmark is, and I think it's only fair to give them a time to propose to us how they could reach that if they think they can.
Councilman Gamma.
Sorry, this one's really tough for me. On one hand, I completely agree with Councilman Nell as far as being fiscally conservative. We need to make cuts, and it's hard to not look at these numbers and think that this is a place where we should do some of that. On the other hand, I totally understand the argument that we have 3 master's level people that probably aren't interested. Or if I was master's level, I wouldn't be interested in, you know, seasonal work. Coming back and again going and working at Hobby Lobby for the other 4 or 5 months or whatever it is. But council has already discussed this. It's not, I think Councilman Pacheco is maybe the only one that was here for that.
I was here.
You were here as well? So I guess that's where I'm struggling is from the economic standpoint, looking at these numbers and stuff, you know, I totally see that argument to be made, but I'm missing the context. I've talked with, you know, somebody from the Museum Association, and, you know, they have their compelling arguments for why it justifies the funding, you know, the preservation and protection of our city's history, and, you know, so they have their perspective as well, and so I would like to hear their perspective and also get some more context as far as we already had this council, already had this discussion, already had hearings, you know, where people came and gave their speeches and stuff, and I guess it's a shame that I don't have that context. I suppose I could go back and read all the news articles, but I'm sure some useful information came out of those previous discussions. I'm wondering why, as Councilwoman Lutz alluded to earlier, why 3 years ago there weren't, you know, wasn't a push to have staff come up with innovative ways to generate revenue. I just feel like I'm missing context, so that's where I'm struggling with it. I don't know what, you know, what can be provided in that, but thank
Vice
you.
Mayor Pacheco.
So, some context of it is that Carter had really just started as our city manager, and he kind of had an opportunity to really look over the whole entire budget, saw some areas that I think he knew that needed some things adjusted and taken care of. We tasked him as a council, that council, to do what you need to do. And we said that, you remember that specifically. We said, Carter, you need to figure this and help us balance it and get everything where it needs to be. And so Carter did just that. He came back to the council at that time and said, here are the areas where I think we can save money and make some cuts and do some stuff. One of that was the museum, and one was CATSI. We were gonna do all that. What ended up happening was a I don't know, tsunami of people from CATSI and the museum that came out and said this is wrong, and et cetera, et cetera. The council at the time, and Sean, you can correct me if I'm wrong, believed in saying Carter is doing what we think Carter's supposed to be doing, and we supported that, including myself, and I know Sean did, and I know several other people. But I think once that compelling conversation came out from everybody, historical buffs, I mean, it was a very large support. We decided that we said, sorry, Carter, we know we told you to, and I even remember saying this from the dais, sorry, Carter, we know we told you to cut the budget,
Right.
but sorry, we backtrack, and now you need to figure this out, which I thought was unfair to Carter, because he did a fantastic job figuring it out, and he ultimately did. Long story short is that if this is the road that the council wants to go down, you need to be prepared to look at people in the eyes and have that conversation, and being able to tell them, we're closing it down, we're going to get rid of 3 positions because they're not coming back, I'll guarantee that. You need to have that conversation. And if we are in that much of a economic, for $140,000, and we're in that much of an economic downturn, and Carter, you can tell me right now if you want to, but if we're in that much, to me, then we can make this work and figure it out if we have to. And that's how I see my perspective. And for $140,000, and yeah, it's a lot of money. It's a lot of money to me because I don't even make that in a year. So that's a lot of money. And I'm not a businessman or businesswoman. So I don't know that. And I don't know those types of things. I do know my budget that I have to cut at home if I can't afford something. But I also cannot look at 3 employees in the eyes and tell their family sorry. And so we've got to figure that out. But if we're prepared to do that, then we can have them come down and have that conversation. But you need to be prepared, because I was on board to cut and to make that decision until every single person started coming down and telling their story and telling us everything, how it impacts their lives and does those. That's the reality of making those cuts. That's, long story short, because I wanted to cut it too. And it was a reality. It was a reality. It was a gut punch. And I don't know, Sean, if you have anything you want to say.
No, it was, and because that was at the time when the energy sector was kind of making its initial crash, and we're looking at some pretty severe revenue issues, and so, yeah, I mean, you said it well enough. we tasked Carter to make cuts where we needed to make cuts, and then we said,
Just kidding.
not here.
It made sense. It did.
Yeah.
Bruce, it made sense.
I understand.
100%.
What,
3-4
so,
years ago.
piggybacking off you, if I may, Mayor, I want to hear from Carter. I mean, this is right in your alley, right? We've had this discussion. So, it's your turn. Sorry.
That's up to you, Mr. Mayor.
Sure, go ahead, and then I'll add in after you.
No problem. I would 100% stand by the recommendation I gave to council 3 or 4 years ago. It would have saved us $160,000 to $170,000 had we implemented it back then, because then we would not have incurred some of the positions that we have incurred since then. That would have been a very natural and good fit with respect to the employees that we're talking about this evening. And accordingly, we'd still have those savings today. We really would. I believe that to my core. Same if we had changed some of those CATSI things. We'd still be enjoying those savings today. You know, and I'm not begrudging the council of the day. Believe me, I'm not. I work for those guys and gals. But I still believe in those proposals and so on, had they been incorporated back then, right? To answer the larger question, though, of whether or not I think we're in dire enough of a circumstance to say we got to do whatever we can, we're going to send people home and so on, I can honestly say that that's not the case. We aren't in that dire of a situation that we need to end people's jobs with the organization in order to save $140,000 or whatever the case may be. Because if that were the case, I'd be bringing you a bevy of layoff questions, right? That would include these as well. And fortunately, we're not in that position, thank heavens. Had the legislature decided to kill direct distribution, which ironically, had they done that, that infusion into our general fund roughly equals what it is that we spend in subsidies for leisure services type programs. I think it's 3.5 compared to 3.8. And so were we in that situation, you're darn right I'd be talking about this kind of a thing, because that's a huge hole to make up in the general fund. I will tell you though that one of the council goals that you're going to see in our next work session will be to give you an analysis that says here's what you've got to do in order to make up the difference in our leisure services funds. Here's the steps you got to take. Here's the decisions you're going to have to make in order to make up each of those gaps, because there are big gaps. It probably won't include the event center, but it will include the general fund dependent funds that we have to be concerned about, which Fort Casper will be one of them. That's a goal I'd like to have your direction to pursue, so that you can see that analysis and determine which steps you'd like to take in order to shorten that gap in the event that we lose direct distribution sometime. Because not only is direct distribution in the sights of many of our legislators, not all of them, but many of them, the city of Casper is viewed as being one that receives largesse through that program that they think can be made up elsewhere. And so, that's a job I've got to take on in terms of continuing the educational process down in Cheyenne to convince them that no, this is not a largesse program that the city of Casper happens to be able to take advantage of. So maybe that was kind of a long answer, Councilman, but those are some of the thoughts I would have in response to some of the dialogue that's happened here tonight. Thank you.
So in summation, you're saying we don't need to worry about this right now?
I will bring you a budget that is balanced, and you are Mr. Mayor, if I may, I'm sorry. Excuse me. I will bring you a budget that is balanced, and I will bring you also the assumptions that we made to design that budget in order for it to be balanced. The job that you have at that point in time is to decide whether or not you like the assumptions that staff is proposing in order to make that budget balanced. And in that circumstance, I would say please, I welcome the test, I welcome the question, because we don't want to carry forward a budget that you aren't comfortable with, and obviously we can't because you got to pass it, right? But testing those assumptions will be a vital part of that process in May. It will not include this right here, but I will bring you something that's balanced. I assure you of that. Thank you.
You're welcome. The only two things that I wanted to clarify is when I talked about the fort, and I correlated back to the event center. The event center is notoriously always not made money.
Right.
And so if we're gonna look at the fort, you better look at the event center, you better look at everything else that's not making money and go after each one of those. This is the point that I'm trying to make. As far as when I say that things aren't seasonal, golf, we quit golfing because snow gets on the ground, so we can't golf anymore. And people that get hired on at the golf course know they're only working for a certain period of time. We ski until we close it down, or until the snow melts, because you can't ski if you don't have snow. And people getting hired on up there know that they're seasonal and that's their job. The fort has people that when they got hired on, they were hired on for the long haul. That is a full-time job. And so I know it's beating a dead horse, but you come back, there is nobody in the world that's going to take a master's job and say, I'll do it for 6 months and then I'll go find something else to do. That's not going to happen. People will go do that at the golf course all day long, and they'll go up to the ski hill all day long and take a seasonal job because it's a seasonal job. We can't treat these people as though it's a seasonal job. And again, if you're going to look at that, you better look at every other facility in this city that's losing money. So, Councilman Kevin.
Didn't I just hear Carter say that he was going to bring back how all of these our leisure stuff all operates and where the subsidies are and all of that so that we can look at those things?
Yep.
Yeah. And again, like I said earlier, I didn't realize that we had 3 master level employees at the fort.
Yep.
I thought that they, like I said, I thought you probably had a curator and a couple of semi-skilled people there. So again, that is a whole different issue as well. So, yeah.
I'm just knowing how Ray feels when I miss him, and I talked before him. Everybody else talking, so I was just catching up because I know how he feels now.
Thank you.
Councilmember Paul.
I think, Carter, what you mentioned, that you're gonna bring us an analysis, and we are gonna see a balanced budget from you. For me, I like to see things, rather than singled out in this way, like to see things as part of a larger conversation with some analysis, with the big picture, instead of trying to piecemeal a strategy together. So it sounds like that is coming our way, and so I think, all of these little sub-items can be discussions. I would feel better if they were discussions of that, rather than freaking everybody out that we're going after this one specific element of what we do, targeted in a targeted manner, versus we've got a strategy, here's how all the different pieces come together. To me, that feels better. It feels more fair, more holistic. So
Agreed.
I'd like to have that conversation and, include these types of things and these smaller bits when we have those conversations.
Vice Mayor Pacheco.
I'm 100% agree with what you just said, and I think that the case is that Carter has always come to us, in all the years I've worked with him, has always come to us with a balanced budget. Mm-hmm. Always. Now, if he came to us and said, we're not going to have a balanced budget, then we'd be in trouble. But every year he's always come to a balanced budget. We look at it, and we rely on the fiscal staff. We rely on the department heads. We rely on these professionals that do this every day and look at that, and they'll bring us together, like you just said, and say, here's our plan, this is what it looks like. And we'll look at those things. And my experience has been Carter's the best city manager this whole state, in this whole entire state. And he knows how to balance a budget. He knows what he's doing.
How much did you pay him?
$20.
I don't like him. I don't like him as a person, but he's a good city manager.
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I really appreciate the candor of this discussion, because the reality is we do need to be talking like this. There does need to be this give and take back and forth between council and staff, and and passing a budget. That's a very critical conversation that we need to have. So thank you. But I want to be sure that I'm, really, really clear as to what you're expecting from staff. We will bring you a balanced budget. That is going to be the case, but it will have subsidy programs in it. We're not going to have the subsidies rectified with regard to the passing of this budget. The second product, however, that I'll be bringing forward to you, if you approve council goals and kind of give me that direction, will be an analysis that says, okay, if you were to make all the hard decisions, and if you were to make all the tough fee increases, and so on and so on and so on, this is what each of these programs would look like in order for them to come to zero. Okay? That's a separate product in preparation for cataclysmic decisions that ostensibly could be made in Cheyenne that would impact the city of Casper, that the city of Casper wouldn't have any control of, as it were. So that if indeed you decided you liked some of the programs and some of the ideas, or you thought you need to employ them all, you would have that blueprint in front of you to pick and choose or deploy all.
Good idea.
Okay?
Everybody
I am
good with that?
Yep.
I am very interested in looking at that.
Thank you.
Nothing I love better.
Thanks,
I
thank
should
you,
say the
Tim.
same thing for an hour.
I hope so.
My favorite.
All right, we're gonna move on to amendment to the new Delta Edition subdivision agreement.
This Kyle likes to hear himself talk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Kind of quietly.
I don't know, I did not know where the new Delta Edition subdivision was until I became more familiar with much of the conversations been had at the Planning Commission level on this topic. Basically, it's the corner of Wyoming Boulevard and 15th, right? Yeah, I keep getting my cross streets mixed up. Where all that new development has taken place. In fact, for those of you who are coffee connoisseurs like I am not, yes, that's right. Yep, the Compass development, where Metro, the East Side Metro is located.
And there's a bank there.
Yeah.
The bank, exactly.
Hilltop Bank, Metro Coffee.
Yes, sir.
Domino's is just on the other side.
Okay,
Yep.
yeah.
Yep. That is absolutely the development we're talking about right now. Years and years ago, when that initial subdivision was originally created, there were changes made to the zoning allowances as it relates to the original subdivision agreement that was passed by the council of the day. Elizabeth here will tell us when that was and give us a lot more detail. But the bottom line is that the subdivision agreement that's coming up before the council to approve via resolution here coming up will put those allowances back into place, consistent with the full throttled allowance that a C2 designation provides by ordinance. The problem with that conversation is a lot of the neighbors in the area have become accustomed to the things that were taken out way back when, and probably don't want to see those come back into place. And so we're trying to give you a heads up as it relates to that public dialogue, because it won't be consistent with a normal, passage of a subdivision agreement that you typically get. This will have some conversation and dialogue that accompanies it. And so Liz is here to help prepare us for that conversation. I think the 20th, is that when that's coming?
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, that's excellent how you teed that up.
Thank you.
You're on.
Back, it is, he's on, he didn't pay me to say that. We're on a roll here.
$20. That's
Yeah, I
all
know,
I'm
I
right.
know.
20
I'm
bucks.
gonna ask for that. Back in 1999, and I think some of this is referred to in the memo, the owner of the property, which is now the Compass, Mrs. Ferguson, had worked to put these land use restrictions on that property. Stafford Square is the subdivision that's up on the hillside, and a lot of them are just nice high-end townhomes, beautiful view of the mountain. You all are getting the picture. 32 residents live in Stafford Square. So she, at the time, had worked with that neighborhood to say we need to kind of protect our view. We want to know what's going to be going down the hillside below us. There's some things we want. Casper Orthopedic was something that was being considered at that point in time. But there were concerns on some of the other business types. And so that is in fact in the memo, what I bolded were the types of businesses in that C2 designation that were prohibited.
Okay.
So what occurred at the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting back in March 18th, and I believe Councilman Nell was there, is that it came forward to Planning and Zoning Commission to lift the restrictions. Back in 2018, the restrictions had been lifted to allow drive-throughs, and that is why we have the bank. But there was some thought that the coffee shop would be in there that would have a drive-through. So at that time, that restriction was lifted in 18. So here we are in 2021. The desire of the developer, so the land's been sold from Mrs. Ferguson to pretty much the Hilltop True Company, and they would like to put an upscale liquor store into that same area where those shops are, where we've got the coffee shops, and we've got some other little boutiques going in there. So they'd like a boutique liquor store in that area. That is prohibited from the 1999 use restrictions. Planning and Zoning Commission heard comment, and there was a lot of it. So we wanted to give you all a heads up that the opportunity for the citizens to speak to council, because that's what they asked for. Planning Commission ultimately said, yes, we will allow this use restriction to be lifted. We believe in free enterprise. This is going to be a well-maintained development. Yes, we'll allow it. So they moved it forward. Normally, we would be bringing it forward as a department, just putting it on consent for all of you. In this case, we are bringing it forward not on consent. It is by resolution, but that will allow property owners to sign up by next Monday or Tuesday in order to speak and have a chance to talk about some of their concerns with having a liquor store, a boutique liquor store there. So it's, as Mr. Napier said, kind of a heads up so that you all are not inundated, really as council members with the concerns on this. So that's what I wanted to share.
Councilman Cathy.
Was Centennial Hills Boulevard even cut through in '99?
Yes. Your Honor, members of council, yes. And the convenience store was one of the first little developments.
I knew the convenience store
And
was
that
first. I
was-
couldn't remember whether,
I had to dig through, because I wasn't living back here at that time, but I had to dig through
Oh,
and
yeah.
talk to Doug Barrett too about that. But that one was very contentious when.
oh yeah,
Logan Jug, wasn't it? Mhm.
because
Interesting.
basically when Centennial Hills was cut through there, before it was cut through, even though it was platted, that was all part of that same agreement that there was gonna be no, I think one of them was no convenience stores even in there. So the precedent has already been set to change things from what that initial,
Correct.
okay.
Councilmember Paul.
I think you said this, Liz, but I just wanna make sure I understood it correctly. What the recommendation of planning and zoning is to restore the full suite of C2 business opportunities there, not just a specific line item.
Your Honor, excellent question, and I'm glad you asked that, councilperson. It's for lot one, and so I wanna clarify that. Lot
Oh.
one.
Oh, so for
I
one
missed
lot?
that.
That is what was, and Councilman Nell may remember that too, because you had everyone up on Heathrow that overlooks lot two that was concerned. But it's only lot one and the Stafford, so in our communication, it's only been really to the Stafford Square, residents, so it's lot one. And the map, I'd asked for a clarified map to go out, cause it was labeled lot 1A, but it's lot one, which is the one down below, the smaller of the two, yep.
Mhm.
So it's, the request is to lift, to allow all uses in that C2 zoning, designation to be for lot one.
Got
The
it.
restrictions will remain on lot two. Excellent question, thank you for
Councilman
pushing.
Gamros. Do you have one?
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Liz. I guess I'm curious to know, these restrictions, when they were put on those lots in the first place, what does that process look like? Thank you.
Your Honor, I have a copy of that, Councilman Gamroth, and it's a fairly lengthy document, and it has to come to council in order to put those restrictions on in this subdivision agreement.
You can read it and then give us.
And
Yeah.
I was just-
I can tell you what's
There
in
are
it.
the Cliff Note versions. It is
Okay.
a little light reading, it's only 9 pages, but it does designate in there what the restrictions.
The reason I'm asking is because if we're considering undoing the process, I'd like to know what went into, before I undo something, I want to know what it went into it in the first place. So, thank you.
I believe, and I apologize on the memo, I believe I know I did, sorry. So when you all get the packet this Friday, the subdivision agreement from 1999 is one of the attachments that is included in that.
Perfect. Thank you.
So you'll have that reading for this weekend.
Councilman Nell?
Thank you, Mayor. From being at that meeting, I can tell you most of the argument and comment from the public was concerning Lot 2, not Lot 1. And it's because it backs right up to their property. And once it was designated that, no, we're just talking about Lot 1, it went much, much smoother. There still was some concern because there's a school back over there, that there was gonna be a bunch of drunks laying around on the sidewalk, 500 feet from a school. But this isn't a tavern, this is a high-end packaged liquor place. So I don't think that argument held any weight either. But I know on Lot 2, they were very concerned about, if you remember correctly, about a brothel or, no, I'm serious.
He's serious.
Like a massage parlor, or they didn't want that in the neighborhood. But like I said, once they took Lot 2 out of the equation, most of the arguments went away. And you have to remember, there's already development on 1. The bank is there. There's already a strip mall there. So I think the only thing as a council we may actually even hear would be, well, should we have a liquor store that close to homes or that close to a school? That's probably all we're going to get now that Lot 2's out of it, don't you think?
I agree.
So.
Well, Liz, I guess the question I would have, so they obviously know that it's a liquor store going in there. Do they know the size of the liquor store and what type it's going to be? I mean, is it going to be, a full retail liquor license going there? Is it going to be a satellite winery going in there? And if those questions haven't been answered, can we have that information available when it
Your
comes
Honor,
time?
very good. We will plan to have the applicant come to make the presentation too, since this is not on consent.
Councilman Kelly?
The way I look at this as well, for anything else to go in on Lot 2, besides the continuation of Casper Orthopedics, they would have to go to P&Z to replat Lot 2. So before anything could change on Lot 2, to put another structure there, it would have to go before P&Z and probably be replatted and blah, blah, blah.
Your Honor, yes.
Is that-
That is correct, as well as probably a lot of topography work.
You think?
I think.
You could have a walkout 2-story brothel there.
Maybe a 3-story.
But I'm not sure it's over 13% grade.
Councilman Nell?
Sir, I'm pretty sure Liz will get us the information, but I know those strip malls are just cubicles, and it was just the one on the end, and it was going to be a high-end wine type of a thing.
That's my point. There's not very much square footage in that
No,
place. It's
there's
not
not,
gonna be.
and I don't even think they're gonna carry beer, so you're not gonna have the normal guy in a pickup pulling up to get beer. I think this is just high-end wine and something else, but we'll find out more, I'm sure, when they come. And it's really no impedance to that neighborhood, and I think that's why P&Z finally just said, oh, we're taking Lot 2 out, yeah, we don't see a problem with this. So, like I said, I really don't anticipate much public comment on it. I guess we'll see.
The biggest thing I can see, and I think the reasons why they brought up some of the other things, is C2, and correct me if I'm wrong, but if you designate it as C2, it does open it up to where in the future they could put a ton of things in there.
Right.
And you'll find that when we go to change things, people get upset because they're like, oh, you're going to put in a massage parlor.
Right.
Massage parlors are brothels. I mean, that's why that
Right.
went down that road.
Right.
But it is simply because of that, because now it expands the amount of things that can go in there. Councilman?
Well, as a council, do keep in mind, if you look at the actual map, there is a buffer between 1 and all the houses. Because Casper Orthopedics is on the one side and the other side is actually buffered by Lot 2. So there's Lot 2's right up against those homes. So that's gonna be a whole nother ballgame. But even if they put a massage parlor in one, which God forbid, there's a complete buffer zone between the housing and where that particular lot is. So that's why that meeting was contentious, and once Lot 2 was taken out, it pretty much dissolved, don't you think? Yeah, so,
I had heard at one time there on that corner, where all the cars are parked right now, that there was gonna be an eatery go in there. On that northwest corner.
Where?
On the northwest corner?
Of lot 1?
Yes.
Yeah, there's a restaurant.
Of lot 1A,
past
yeah.
them. There is a restaurant past them. It hasn't been built out yet, but there's spots.
Correct. Those are
well, the
ones that were
Trues usually do some pretty classy
they're
stuff.
very-
They're generally not the type of people you have to worry about.
Yep. Before dirt had hardly even been broke, that was what threw it.
Well, and they don't loan, Trues don't own lot 2, by the way. It's
No.
owned by someone else. That's why it got separated out in that meeting.
Correct.
Correct.
Yep.
So,
I think Jasper Orthopedics owns that one thing.
That's the
okay,
ones
anything else on this? Okay, thank you.
I'm at it.
that, like, medical laboratories. We can test
All right, we'll move on to parking fees, Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Pursuant to council's request, this is a follow-up item from last meeting, which effectively served as a preparatory discussion for your first reading of the parkway discussion and parking discussion coming up in the next regular council meeting. And so you would ask that we have a conversation on fees. And that's what this memo is designed to cover. And this conversation is meant to bring out discussion on. And so the memo that you have in front of you should capture all the fees that are being discussed in both the parking manual as well as the ordinance and so on that Mr. Henley clarified the distinction between in our last conversation on this topic. And so after reading the memo and debating tonight, if you have any changes you'd like to see, then pursuant to a majority of the council wanting to do it, we can prepare those amendments for discussion on Tuesday night if necessary.
Councilman McCaffrey.
There on the first page of that, where we're still talking about the parkway parking, I guess I've got to kind of go along with some comments that Councilman Nell has brought up, is that $250 a year after they put everything else into it seems to be a bit much. I could see an initial $250 fee because of having to go out and get the neighbor approval, blah, blah, blah. But after that, I don't see why we couldn't go to the $50 a year to be able to update stickers or whatever, similar to what we're doing with the handicap parking and the school zone type stuff.
Councilman Nell.
I agree with you, Mr. Cathy. If we're gonna go this route, I know there's a lot of people upset about parking in the parkways. And I will tell you, Carter, looking at the third option available under parkway alternatives really seems to fit. Like I said, I don't know that everybody's gonna be happy because you're only gonna pick one side of that street to park on, and you're gonna have people, they're gonna having to cross 2 lanes of traffic to get to their vehicle, and I just don't think that's the answer either. I do like the parking on the parkway thing if they're enhancing the property, but like Mr. Cathy said, and I've said before, if they're gonna pay the money to upgrade our property, as they're saying, I just can't see charging them more than $50 a year just to keep the permit in effect, and, you know, it just doesn't seem fair any other way. And I do like the change we made for the RVs from 500 down to 250. I think we'll get a lot more play doing that, and I think it's more fair. That's all I have.
Councilman Gamro.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You know, I agree with the hesitation of charging somebody the $250 a year, but also as a reminder from the last meeting, I believe, Carter, the position of the city was that this is not an upgrade or enhancement, it's an alteration. They don't view it as, you know, constituents improving the property, just altering it for another purpose. So just wanted to remind us of that conversation from the last week. Carter, could you please remind me and I guess the rest of council the costs, what are the costs to the city other than, you know, the permitting? I guess it would help make sense to me, you know, to be able to justify a cost like that, to know exactly what is required of the city to allow people to park there. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Gamroth, are you referring to the $250 versus?
Yes.
Okay, okay. You know, I actually think that if indeed we're talking about a $50 a year fee, once the alteration has been made, that may not be an inappropriate fee to consider to renew permits for use of that property. I also like the idea of having the fee initially be in the neighborhood of $250 for the first time, because indeed there are a lot of staff commitments in terms of watching the pour and making sure that the construction takes place appropriately and all those kinds of things. And so if indeed council were looking for an alternative to this idea in that fourth bullet on your memo, I think we could get behind the $50 a year to renew a permit, along with the initial permit fee being in the neighborhood of $250.
Thank you. I'll get a follow-up. So knowing that, I guess on its face, that's the proposal that I would support. But I also just wanted to provide a reminder. You know, this is one of those situations, as is the case with most of them, not going to please everyone. I think we as a council are doing our best to allow people the opportunity to use the parkway at, you know, not at the expense of the city, especially in these times. So a reminder, you know, city staff did do an analysis, and very few communities allow people to park on the parkway at all. So regardless of the resolution we come up with, you know, hopefully it will be, you know, the best result of all of these discussions, and I think it will, you know, it'll provide an avenue for people to, you know, whether they agree with all of the stipulations we put in place, it allows people the opportunity to use the parkway where a lot of communities, they're not offered the same opportunities.
Councilman Johnson?
He stole my thunder, so I'm not gonna beat a dead horse. Thanks, Kyle.
Yeah.
More eloquent.
The only question, because I would imagine we're going to get this question, because obviously, you know, some people are going to be like, no, I'm not doing this, I've parked there for years, I'm just going to keep parking there. Is the understanding that we're going to start enforcing individuals that don't have permits? Because I think that that's something that's going to have to be communicated, otherwise it's just going to be seen as this, well, the people who want to follow the rules will, and the ones that don't.
That is the case.
Thank you.
Just be the puppet over
I'm sorry.
Well, you know.
I see he's pulling the strings.
Who's gonna be doing the enforcing? Is it gonna be the police officers or is it gonna be code enforcement?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
Yes.
Liz and
Yes.
Keith, do you mind if I defer to them?
Yes.
Just curious.
You know, Mayor, Council, there are opportunities for both. However, my CSOs, you know, is my primary enforcement arm for parking. They're the ones that are out looking for the trailers parked on the roadway and the other things. So, you know, as is often the case, primarily will be complaint driven. You know, so the ones that are taking advantage of parking on the parkway right now, they're scattered throughout the community, and you know, as we see them, we can address those. But when people notify us, you know, hey, I'm tired of my neighbor parking on the parkway, you know, that's going to fall very much onto the what I envision my community service officers do. Code compliance also has, you know, they're mobile and they're taking care of other things. You know, that same residents that they're parking on the parkway, there's a good chance that they have abandoned vehicles, that they have weed and other debris problems. So I very much look at this as a team effort. Liz is nodding heavily, but I think this falls into both of our purviews. And so we have the ability to attack it from two different angles.
Okay, anything else on this?
That was clear.
So really the only change we're looking at is on the
Is everyone feeling okay?
parkway, 250 the first time, 50 or year after that.
I think so.
That's it, everything else is good?
I think so.
Okay. All right.
So now, will this be in the ordinance, or are we gonna have to make an amendment when it comes to the floor?
We're gonna make an amendment.
I tell you, we'll just have it ready to go for you guys, then you don't have to make the amendment.
Oh, okay.
So,
Okay.
yeah, we haven't voted on it so far,
length.
Oh,
As
okay.
far as I'm concerned.
Councilman Nell.
Please keep in mind also for those of you watching, it's a pilot program. It's a test program for us. It's only on 12th and 13th, which 8 million miles a year are put on those roads, and we know there are other skinny streets in town that could use something like this. But this is kind of our test. This is our pilot program to see how it's going to work, and you know, and I, like Mr. Gamera said, I think this is a great thing the council's doing to try to help some people that have asked for help. And you know, we're doing the best we can to try to alleviate the problem. So we'll see how it comes out. It's all about the testing. So yeah.
Okay, we'll move on to agenda review. Mr. City Manager.
Once the trees have all died, then.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As far as agenda review is concerned, next week, just to give you a heads up, we do have the audit that we basically deliver to the council. Give you an opportunity to ask some questions about it and so on. That'll happen in pre-meeting, and then that basically completes that process. As we all know, we also have the beginning of the reading process for the discussion you just had here, as it relates to parkways and so on. Many of Mr. Johnson's stuff will take place as well, if I remember correctly, next time also. And we covered that last week in pre-meeting. And we will have the resolution pertaining to New Delta next week as well. And beyond that, I'd be open to any other questions that you might see here that we can cover.
Any questions from anybody? Okay.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, for the 27th, we have some more budget discussions that are coming your way. We will be talking about council goals and objectives that potentially, would complete at least, we think could complete that conversation. We're open if it doesn't. You're also going to see a budget proposal as it relates to CATSI, given that that's a relatively new operation coming into the auspices of the city of Casper. So that we wanted to give a little more attention to, since it's a brand new cost center. And you won't see that level of cost center review in the full budget conversation that we have in May. So this is a little bit different, but it is a different situation, a new situation the city will be undergoing.
Question along those lines, have you come up with a new name yet?
Great question, Councilman, Mr. Mayor. We will be revealing that in the budget presentation or when the strategic plan is done. Miss.
Your Honor, you were, Mr. Manager, you were going to send out the options to them to get their input,
And that happens when?
like tomorrow.
Oh, okay.
The artwork is all.
Ah, there you go.
I just hated to see us keep calling it CATSI when that was a
Fair
different
enough,
organization
yeah.
going away.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And that's all I have for June.
Okay. Anybody else on the agenda? Okay.
Just, sorry, sir, just concerning CATSI, I know I did get a call from a local, I guess, rapper that wraps these vehicles, asking how they get to bid on that, and Carter, I referred it to you.
Great.
So,
Yeah, no problem.
I hope that's the appropriate.
What do they care about buses? They want to like announce the new name for us, like in a song.
That told people humor.
Polite laugh there. Thank you.
All right, legislative review.
Mr. Mayor, Council, we do have a final report that we received today from our partners at WHAM that gives us kind of what happened to all the variety of legislative things that we were following. I'd like to get that report kind of proofed and sent forward to you, and then maybe in the next legislative review we can answer some questions pursuant to that information that you'll receive shortly. And other than that, I don't really have much to cover in that item.
Okay. Great.
Oh, really quick before we kind of go council round table, there is an Eagle Scout here visiting.
He's working.
Working on Eagle Scout.
Not
Sorry.
quite there yet.
Sorry.
I've been
Potential.
working here.
Current. Getting ready to be an Eagle
Eagle
Scout. You want to
Scout
introduce
candidate.
yourself, really? Really quick.
I am Joshua. I'm pretty much just here working on a merit badge to help hopefully earn my Eagle in the future. Well, in 2 years. That's all I have left. And I'm from Troop 1167, or probably you've heard it 167. And we're stationed over in the Elks Lodge.
Thank you for coming. We appreciate it. I know
Absolutely.
we know it's a lot of work to do that. So.
I earned my Eagle too.
Did you?
Yeah, I'm driving him around.
Good.
I earned my Eagle.
Very true.
Scale from 1 to 10. Boring or not boring? This
Actually,
meeting.
it's pretty interesting.
Oh, hey, all right.
Scale of 1 to 10.
Did he get the $20? Did
Well,
he get the $20?
So that the council understands, can you tell them exactly how much work you're having to put in? This? Being an Eagle is a tremendous amount of work, is it not?
Oh, Lord. Right now, you have to complete a certain amount of merit badges, which I can't remember the number off the top of my head.
12 Eagle and the 21 regular badges.
So, all in all, about 33 merit badges.
That's the minimum.
Minimum. And of course, the 12 are Eagle required, and the one I'm working on right now is being part of the community. And so, one of the actual things I have to do is attend one of these meetings, and hopefully, I have to at least maybe interview one of you guys and ask questions.
I'll give you the mayor.
On a silver platter.
And then after I've finished earning these merit badges, I then do a community fundraiser where I have to somehow benefit it in a certain way. A very popular thing is, cleaning up parks or churches or something along the lines of that.
And you've been doing this as well.
Oh, jeez. First grade. I can't remember. First grade? It's been that long?
Do you know what your Eagle project is gonna be?
No.
No,
It's
yeah.
scary.
We
How old are
have-
you?
I am 16.
So you've been doing this for 15 years working towards this. Congratulations to you.
So I would suggest, my son did his Eagle project at the airport. So they have the World War
He
II
started first grade,
exhibits,
wasn't
and so they're always looking for more exhibits and helps with those
PhD and I didn't go to
exhibits,
school
so
for
he
15 years.
did the exhibit for the tank. So, but it's an easy exhibit and it gets a lot of.
We have 2 more scouts right now that are working on the Eagle project. So we had 2 that earned their Eagle last year. We have 2 that are earning their Eagle this year, and we're gonna have Joshua and 2 more next year. So yeah, if anything, there's anything that the city thinks that we can, as the scouts, help with. I was listening to you guys about the fort. I think Casper Fort is an amazing place, but it needs something in Great Council, Wyoming, could have these kids go over and help, either with promoting it, doing some service, having some of our campouts at the fort, not at the RV park, because the reason we stopped using or stopped using the Casper Fort was because they will send us to the RV park to do our campouts. If we could actually do them, the Fort campground, I think that you will have a lot of our troops paying for the honor to be there. We do flag retirements, and we also have our state jamboree that we do every summer, but we could move it to a winter campout, since that is when you have your short months, and we go invite some of the other troops to do that flag retirement ceremony there, and maybe even involve the community, because one of the things that we find out is nobody knows how to retire a flag or what to do with a flag that is frayed, other than to put it in a mailbox at the Elks Lodge. Just my 2 cents, since I'm on fast, nothing new.
Well, perfect.
You made the comment about winter stuff. They still have the Klondike Derby?
We couldn't have it last year because of COVID, but we are still camping. I mean, my daughter, it's on Boy Scouts. We have 1 single troop in the whole city of Boy Scouts that is only girls. We have 5 right now. We're trying to build it up, and they just camped out this weekend, and they're camping next month, and they're still camping out in the snow. I mean, that's part of their training, how to survive in winter conditions. So, you know, we can have people to come over and use the board or any other facilities for that matter. And we parents pay for some fees for camping. So you said that you don't have these people supporting the board. Some of us parents will pay for our kids to go there instead of having to camp out in the skateboard park. I mean, it's just a suggestion.
Well, good luck.
Cool.
Thank you.
Yeah,
guys.
good luck.
Yeah, thank you.
Good stuff.
Can I just say, I'm hiring CSOs in 2 years.
Yeah. I'll try.
Sorry.
I just got slammed.
Hopefully you have a recruitment unit.
Let's go in engineering. Civil engineering.
Hey, there you go.
Eagle Scouts are actually quite smart,
Yeah,
aren't
all
they?
right.
What am I, chopped liver?
Vice Mayor Pacheco.
Nothing here. I just have a LGBTQ meeting on Friday, 3 o'clock. And so other meetings next week, but I'll talk about those next week. So looking forward to that.
Councilman Gammon.
Thank you. I just wanted to thank everyone. Councilwoman Pollock and I had missed them at the end of last year, but we've been spending a lot of time together going on tours of all the city facilities, regional water, solid waste, wastewater, metro, the service center. So it's been very enlightening. I've learned a lot, and just wanted to thank all the city staff. They were all amazing, very good guides, very knowledgeable, very informative, very dedicated, employees. Was amazed everywhere we went. It felt like every staff member had been there for 20, 30 years. So the retention is amazing. Just had a really, really good time. So wanted to thank all the city staff for all of that. Learned a lot. And then I attended the Casper Youth Council meeting on last Sunday. Ms. Wistison is here as their representative, and so it's exciting to hear about the things that they're working on. I'll give them a little more time. Very exciting ideas, but still ideas that are coming to fruition. But I'm excited to hear what they're working on. So glad I'm the liaison there. That's all. Thank you.
Councilman Johnson.
Your dad is Joe, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's okay. You grew up since last time I saw you. You used to be my boss. Okay. I personally would like a presentation at a work session on the DEA grant that we executed here. And just because I have some questions and maybe some more information would answer those questions, if it pleases the crown.
That
On the
one
work session.
Oh my god. Oh my god.
And then I may or may not be here next week. I'll keep you updated, Mayor, on that. But other than that's all I got.
All right, everybody okay with adding that to the list?
Can we start wearing crowns? Yes.
Okay. Councilwoman Ingerson.
Capes.
I don't have much. Historic preservation, there are, they've got tied into the city website. I don't know if everybody's familiar with that, but they're actually getting a walking tour, and they're starting to kind of tweak the website. So I encourage everybody to go there, but it's kind of cool. They're highlighting some of the buildings and stuff, so the general public can just go to this website and then just see different buildings, and you click on the little tabs and it'll tell you about the buildings and the history of that building. So I suggest everybody to kind of take a look at it. It's going to be fully out, I think, in June. So I think it's going to be really helpful for everybody, so you can just do your own walking tour if you have guests or something. That's it.
Councilman Nell.
Thanks, sir. A few things. One is the Event Center held a concert this past week with Tracy Lawrence, Justin Moore, and forgive me for forgetting the little gal. They had some hilarity. He locked his keys in the bus and they were a little late or whatever. But my point is we had a couple thousand people attend, which is right up to the amount of people we were allowed to have in there. May 1st that changes, and I believe we go to full capacity now. But there's a lot of things coming up this summer. People are starting to get out. I know the Gaslight's putting on a tremendous amount of concerts. They have like 7 booked in the old stock-up slots. There's going to be a lot of things going on in the community, which is going to be great for us. Secondly, I just thought it was really awesome that you showed up, even though your liaison isn't here with you tonight. So I congratulate you for coming on your own. I think that's awesome. And lastly, Dwight Gunnair, who is the coach at Casper College, just won Coach of the Year. His Lady T-Birds are ranked 3rd in the nation. They are undefeated, headed to the NCAA championship. So we have a very real possibility of bringing a national championship to Casper, because they haven't lost a game and they are amazing. So if you haven't had a chance to watch them this year, you won't get to, because they'll be headed to nationals now. But other than that, that's all I have. Thank you. Oh, one other thing, I did want to thank this board publicly. I think it's absolutely amazing when you take this many personalities and this many different people, and we work together so well. I'm just really proud to be part of this board, and I'm proud to be on here with all of you. And so I just wanted to make sure that was said, and that's all I have.
Councilman Cathy.
Well, the Avs are in first place in the Western Division and have the most points of any team in the NHL. But beyond hockey, have a Joint Powers Board meeting, special meeting on Thursday for the Hall of Justice and Detention Center. It's going to be going over the garage door replacement on the Hall of Justice. Yeah, anyhow, one of those, and then trying to set their budget for the next year. So if you have anything that, from the city standpoint, let me know before 10 o'clock Thursday.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Lutz.
Just really briefly, so I sit on the Amico Joint Powers Board, and I think obviously a lot of us know that, you know, they have Three Crowns Golf Course, couple buildings over there, Big King Boulevard, people use to, you know, cut across. But I think, especially those of us who maybe weren't around during this era, I think people forget that there used to be like an oil refinery there. And so I've been learning a lot of history, like through the Amico Joint Powers Board, and it's actually amazing. Like, if you guys haven't actually like looked back through like the pictures of, like, you can see the refinery, and then you can see it, you know, being dismantled and things like that, like the remediation efforts between WDQ and BP and all these other things. It is overwhelming how crazy it is that in the middle of town there used to be an oil refinery, and now there's just this beautiful golf course and beautiful business buildings right alongside the river. And so if you have the opportunity to learn more about that chunk of town, there's a lot to learn. So I just wanted to put that out there.
I remember driving by the refineries and kid.
What's it just go
Swimming
up
in
into
the river?
every day, legend?
Finance committee meeting.
Councilmember Pollock.
Yeah, we'll tell them when we talk about it.
An easy way to do what Councilmember Lutz just talked about, there's a lot of cool historical information just on the trail. Go walk the trail, read the signs, really awesome stuff there. So yes, I've been going on all those tours along with Councilman Gamroth, and as I was going on them, I was thinking like, wow, wouldn't it be so cool if there was a day where citizens could come check out some of these facilities? And I was going through Facebook, and lo and behold, Metro is hosting one such day tomorrow from 1 to 4 at that facility. So it's kind of a call to action to folks who are interested in that to go take the opportunity to check out that facility.
Cool.
Hope to see some other of those types of things in other facilities throughout the year. I don't know if that's a thing that always happens, or you know, but I'll definitely be keeping an eye out so I can try to keep people up to date on those. There are a few other opportunities to get engaged as well, so I guess that's the theme of my comments tonight. There's an open house for the Metropolitan Planning organization about the transportation system. That is Wednesday, April 28th from 5 to 6:30 at Gruner Brothers. I would encourage folks to go there. Transportation is one of the most critical things that we facilitate as a city, and so getting public input on that will be enormously helpful to that group to make sure that the way we have planned to engage with the public on some decision making is satisfactory, that people feel good about it, and that we have buy-in. So please, if you've got a moment, it's a come and go type of open house, so please take some time to go to that if you can. And then the last one's sort of a question, possibly a question. I saw as well, Chief, that there was an opportunity for, I think, bars and restaurants to partner with the police department regarding sexual assault intervention. So I was wondering, I didn't know the process to get involved with that partnership, but I thought that was a really important thing that I would like more people to know about. So is there a way that I can tell people to sign up for that, or how do you go about getting involved with that?
Mayor, Councilwoman, thank you for bringing up you know, April is Sexual Assault Awareness Month. We've got a lot of initiatives going, but the one that we're piloting right now is this active bystander assistance. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to train local licensed liquor establishments staff to recognize the signs of impending sexual assault and to get engaged in preventing those things. So if they were to reach out to my victim services, Leslie Fritzler, she's available in our her phone number is easily accessible.
Great.
And she would be able to make arrangements for that. We believe it's going to be very successful, and those active trainings are beginning this week. We've already done you should see a press release coming out on our social media where we went around and took photos, a photo shoot opportunity at the participating establishments. So
Great.
I think there's still room, but this is a pilot. We want to expand it into the years to come.
Great, thanks. Yeah, I hope some folks can take good advantage of that and that we see some positive outcome from those efforts. And that is all I have.
Okay, I went in right after Councilman Kathy this afternoon, when looked at the dispatch has their remote setup, if you will, and it was pretty interesting to see how they can handle, basically set up a mini dispatch right in their own home if they wanted to. In case in point, we were just talking about the amount of snow that we got here a few weeks ago, and when if you had people on call that actually had those that they took home with them, essentially they could dispatch from home and answer 911 calls and everything else. So technology is amazing these days, and I would, for one, would like to get more information on that, potentially, you know, maybe move forward on that. Saturday at 4 o'clock, David Street Station with, is that this weekend?
It's next weekend.
Next, the following weekend? Okay, so 2 weekends from now, Officer Garrett and Officer Carlson will be receiving an award at David Street Station. So, want to make sure everybody that can be there comes and joins us for that. And last but not least, I wanted to point out that Darius Wiggins, I don't know how many people know who he is, Sean Wiggins' son. He's a student up at Natrona County, or I'm sorry, Kelly Walsh. Man, sorry, Darius. And Brent and everybody else. At Kelly Walsh, did the 200-meter event in 21.29 seconds and broke a 40-year record.
Wow.
At Kelly Walsh High School. So, shout out to Darius. That's awesome. So, it's good to see things getting broken. Councilman Nell.
One thing I did forget, sir, and I just wanted to throw this out there. We got an email during session tonight. Mr. Johnson and Ms. Lutz shared it with me. When I opened up my phone to do the calculations on the percentages with the group that was here earlier, they watched me enter my passcode in my phone right over the camera. That's why I left the room and went over there and I changed my passcode. But I wanted to thank, I don't know exactly who that was that sent the email during the session, but I wanted to thank them for doing that. I thought that was really kind.
You can thank them right now.
Thank you very much. And I also wanted to let you know, the rest of us should probably be aware of that because I never thought twice about it.
Yeah, I didn't either.
And so that was really kind of them to let me know so that not everybody can access my phone. So anyway, oh, and by the way, if you go into Three Crowns Golf Club in the main part, they have pictures of the old refinery all over. You can get some really cool looks at what that used to look like. Anyway, thank you for the extra time.
Okay. Anything else?
No, sir.
All right. Thank you.
Nope.
Councilman Kathy.
Almost.
Thank you,
Almost.
Councilman Kathy, sir.
I wanted to let everybody know that the Finance Committee got the audit report this morning, and we will be looking over that, and finances suck. No. No, they don't. It was a very good report, so we thank you.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
I appreciate you telling me that I have a mailbox.
Oh, you didn't have a mailbox?
No, nobody told me anything.
Let's see, what else?
I am positive there's other things that I haven't been told. I am 100% got a lot more junk than
Does anybody see?
Right? I think that's how it works sometimes.
It's just kind of
I
like
couldn't
running
resist.
out randomly.
Oh, golly.
Me too.
Oh, heck.